All right, this is episode 63. You're back. I'm back. We're all back. Bible Time's back. We've never not been back, which means we are back talking about verses 19 through 21 of chapter 2. And what we've been seeing so far is that, false teachers, they have power that they use for evil purposes, but the firm foundation of God stands. And what a great reminder that politics and personalities, heresy, hate, governments, greed, whatever it may be, it cannot overturn the church because the church is this enduring and resilient temple. And we should not only be encouraged by that, but we should also be reminded that the church is a sacred space where God operates, and that demands our responsibility of being pure, of departing from wickedness. And as we come to verse 20, Paul continues to stress the believer's responsibility. The question isn't, is God sovereign? It's not, will God be faithful? We know that the firm foundation of God stands and that the church cannot be overturned. The question is, will you and I be faithful? And that's what Paul stresses here. So let's get into it. Verse 20. Now in a large house, there are not only gold and silver vessels, but also vessels of wood and clay, some for honorable use, but some for dishonorable use. And now, what exactly is going on here, right? We got gold and silver, and that sounds good, but then we also have wood and clay, and that sounds not as good. And then how does this honorable and dishonorable stuff work out? What exactly is going on? And the closest parallel to this verse is in 1 Corinthians 3. And in 1 Corinthians 3, Paul says that the foundation of the church is Jesus Christ, that he's the Messiah. He's the Son of the living God. He came to save sinners. He suffered for our sin. He died in our place. He rose from the dead. And that means there is forgiveness and eternal life in him. And that's not just good news. That is the greatest news. And that truth of who Jesus is and what he accomplished, that is the foundation of the church. And now believers must build upon that foundation. And so in 1 Corinthians 3, Paul says that some believers, they'll build on this foundation with gold and silver and precious stones. In other words, their service for the church is treasured and it's prized in the sight of God. And in the same way that you treasure and prize gold and silver and precious stones, these believers have served God with the right motives, with a good heart. And so in the end, whenever they stand before God, and when all of their labor is evaluated by fire, not fire of judgment because these are believers, right? But fire to test the quality of their deeds. The fire not only further refines and highlights the beauty of their work withstands the test of fire because their work was gold and silver and precious stones. But in 1 Corinthians 3, Paul also says that there are believers who build on the foundation with wood and hay and straw. And you should know where this is going because wood and hay and straw are flammable. That's how you start a fire. And Paul's point is that you can be a believer and you can serve God with the wrong motives. You can serve God with a bad heart. And when you stand before God and all of your labor and work is evaluated and tested by fire, the fire burns up everything. And all that you place before God, it gets burned up because you didn't do it for God. You did it for yourself. It doesn't get refined. It gets burnt up. Why? Because you gave God a wood, hay, and straw. You tried to give God something that was subpar, mediocre, and low quality. And so just as First Corinthians illustrates faithfulness versus unfaithfulness amongst believers, 2 Timothy 2 verse 20 illustrates the same type of thing. And so now in a large house, there are not only gold and silver vessels, so there are believers who are useful and they serve the Lord in the church and they do it for the right reasons, for the right motives. And in doing so, it's honorable and it's valuable work in the sight of God. But there are also vessels of wood and clay. And so maybe you actually did serve the Lord and the church, but you did it for the wrong reasons. Maybe you were serving so that other people could see you serving. You wanted to look good or whatever the reason might be. There was something in your heart that you didn't deal with. And in turn, that wasn't really service for God. That was something for someone else, for something else. And that's why Paul calls these believers vessels of wood and clay, because wood and clay are commonplace. And when you place vessels of gold and silver next to vessels of wood and clay, then you quickly realize that these vessels of wood and clay, these things are subpar. These are mediocre and low quality, and that's why Paul says, but some for dishonorable use. The idea behind this word dishonorable is the idea of shame and disgrace, and that's Paul's point. It's that it's a disgraceful and a shameful thing to be used by God, even though you're a believer, to be used as a vessel of wood or of clay. And so for believers within the church, the charge should be clear that on that spectrum of faithfulness and unfaithfulness for believers, that we must be useful for Christ, that we must serve him for the right reasons and the right motives, to be a vessel of gold or silver. This is the church. And so don't serve the church with half your heart, and don't do this with half your strength. Do this with the right motives for the right person, for Jesus Christ.
All right, episode 63. We've got 2 questions for you today in Question Time with Tommy, and they are pretty good ones, so hold on to something. Question 1, what are correct motivations to serve God? And if you say, oh, because there's a cutie that serves in the pre-K class and I want to hang out with her, that is the wrong motivation. Just going to get that one out of the way. Question 2. What are indicators that you are serving God in a way that is dishonorable? Oof, nobody wants to be dishonorable. That's bad. Be honorable. And come back and watch tomorrow. And we'll see you then. Bye.